Hello and welcome to this morning's episode of Trending, brought to you in association with Iconic Coffee. If you head over to shop.iconic.com and use the code TRENDING, you get 10% off. How you doing, Jay?
I'm good, mate. How are you feeling?
I'm all right, thanks, mate.
Excellent. Right, today we're going to talk about a couple of stories related to fertility. Now, we covered this a bit in the past, didn't we, to do with fertility rates have been declining around the world for the last few years, but they've been really, really accelerated since you know what. But it's also all of a sudden becoming actually mainstream discussed when before it wasn't, which was always a red flag, because when it's something so important like this and it's not discussed, yet things that aren't particularly relevant or not real, like climate change, are discussed, you know there's a reason for that. Now it's starting to be discussed. So today, a story from the BBC, world fertility rates in an unprecedented decline, the UN say. Now this study has been from a variety of countries across the world, including countries in Africa, Asia, North America, Australasia and Europe. So normally when you hear fertility rates discussed, they talk about the Western countries, don't they? That people are having less children. They don't always go into why, but whereas families in Asia, for example, might have 3-4 children to a family, whereas here 2 is generally considered the standard, very few having 4 or 5, whereas a couple of generations ago that would have been quite common, wouldn't it, mate? But this story details some of the factors why, and one of the big ones is finance, time and energy to be able to put into it, and also health-related conditions. Now, it doesn't go into what those health-related conditions are and whether they're related to fertility or not, or whether it's just, I don't know, let's say mobility issues and you can't be able to do certain things. But
there we go. What certain things can you do, Joe?
If you were in a wheelchair, for example, are you going to be able to give absolutely everything to a child in the same way? No. So therefore, you'd probably have that in your mindset, whether you choose to have one or not. So there's lots of reasons. I think if you're terminally ill, you're not going to have a child. There's lots of things, but you would assume that it's to do with fertility. It's things like infertility caused by a number of different things. We made a film last year called Infertile, which dived into some of the reasons why, and it's not just one, it's a number of them, whether it's hormone disrupting chemicals in domestic cleaning products, in medical and pharmaceutical related products, whether it's diet, whether it's fitness, whether it's health conditions like diabetes and so on. But also today, this story is very interesting. This is from CNN, but you'll find this, if you put this into a search engine, you'll find it from a number of different news outlets. A long-awaited birth control option for men may be closer to reality. Now, bearing in mind the story I've just spoken about previously, which is saying that fertility rates are declining already, they now want to add another blockage, which will cause long-term issues, as the pill does, for example. They just want to add it to men this time. So after decades of false starts, researchers are finally making progress on long-acting and reversible. Don't believe that for a second. See the pill, see puberty blockers, see cross-sex hormones. When they say they're reversible, they're not. Long-acting and reversible birth control option for men. The experimental product is a hormonal gel that men rub on their shoulders, normal, once daily. Over time, it blocks the production of sperm in the testes. So you're blocking a natural process. You're disrupting hormones. Don't even pretend to tell me that's reversible and that's not going to potentially cause other negative impacts on your body and other hormones in your body, because especially if you put it on your shoulders, it's got to go all the way down to there. So it's going to be hitting other important hormones and regulatory systems within the body. It's going to be causing so many problems.
Well, I'm sure there'll be some kind of pharmaceutical product developed to fix those problems. So.
All day long.
When you sent me the story, I looked at that because I don't tend to read CNN.
Who does?
As a matter of course, it's not one of my sort of go-tos. But I tend to follow the subplot a fair bit in life. So I looked at it and I was like, okay, right, well, who's behind it then? So one of the people behind it is a non-profit. Now, whenever I see non-profit, I'm instantly suspicious because they don't tend to be particularly reputable organisations in terms of human health and human well-being generally. You look at mass immigration, it's always non-profits that tend to be behind these sort of things. So I looked into it and I saw Population Council was the main driver of it, an organisation called the Population Council. Now this was founded in 1952 by John D. Rockefeller. I almost said that wrong. Rockefeller. Obviously, anyone that's kind of into this information or is aware of the world will know the Rockefeller family are as cult as you can get, pretty much. Now, everyone sort of talks about the UN Agenda 2030, Agenda 21, as it basically was previously before they sort of kicked the can down the road a little bit more. Population control is obviously massively part of that. Getting people off of the land, rewilding for climate change, all these different things. The World Health Organization ties into that as well. They all basically come from the Rockefellers.
They do, yeah.
The founding of the United Nations, the Rockefellers were hugely integral in the founding of them, even down to the fact where they donated. Bear in mind, these are money-obsessed people. They donated prime real estate in Manhattan.
Yeah.
For the headquarters of the UN, which is now still the headquarters of the UN, land that's worth, I think, about $8.5 billion or something insane. I'm sure they did that out of the kindness of their heart. So I found that interesting when I saw that story. I thought, oh, it ties into the big dogs.
Yeah, because the Rockefellers were involved in a number of different eugenics programs, and an organisation called Planned Parenthood, which Dad wrote about previously. A guy called Richard Day, who was heavily involved in that, Dr. Richard Day, who spoke about the end of natural procreation and the fact that they were going to make boys and girls the same. He spoke about so many things in a book called Everything You Need to Know But Never Been Told. Dad quotes him heavily. He spoke about a number of things that we've seen play out over the last few years, but in particular this one, where he spoke about fertility, the end of the natural procreation, which what that does is if you look at so many different things we've seen in the last few years that have created a dependency upon the state, imagine having a dependency upon the state for who can and cannot have children. I mean, you already have that a little bit with the financial ability to have children, which this first story I spoke about listed as a main reason, or one of the main reasons people are not having kids, can't afford to. But so all of a sudden then you create a medical dependency on the state where you can't just procreate yourself. You need medical intervention, which costs money, which obviously then someone has to say yes to.
Yeah, you'd have to tick boxes in the
so
state
many
approves
boxes
of you.
Exactly.
Let me check your social media account before I agree that you're allowed to have kids.
100%. Are you going to vaccinate your kids? For example, things like that are definitely going to be factors, 100%. And I think, just a final topic on this, I think when you break it down, procreation is the most natural, basic thing as a species we do. And as our world has moved more unnatural, we've become more disconnected from a natural way of living and how we're designed to live, whether that be through technology, whether that be the way that we're living our lives, the things that we're eating, things we're doing. It's no surprise that this has obviously become an issue. No surprise it's become an issue. You can't take something that's biological and really natural and chuck it into a really synthetic world that we live in and expect there not to be a massive discrepancy there, which is what we're seeing. And the fact that we've seen this rise and it's not one of the key issues being talked about by politicians and health leaders just tells you something, because it should be, because procreation's gone, what's left?
Well, it's the end of the species.
Yeah, and that's the idea, I believe.
Of course it is, yeah.
Certainly in its current form.
Right, LA protests live updates. Right, this is obviously breaking constantly. This is from The Independent in the UK. Trump mobilizes 4,000 National Guard and 700 Marines to crack down on anti-ICE unrest. I was speaking about this obviously a lot yesterday. The Trump administration is going to deploy another 2,000 National Guard troops to assist in the response to protests against the immigration policies in Los Angeles. They will join 2,000 guardsmen already set to be stationed throughout LA, as well as a contingent of up to 700 Marines mobilized by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. California Governor Gavin Newsom slammed the decision, calling it reckless and pointless, claiming that only a few hundred of the original Guard troops have been deployed. This isn't about public safety, Newsom said. It's about stroking a dangerous president's ego. Well, yep, Trump does have a dangerous ego, but so do you, Gavin. It's meant to escalate, and this is what I was trying to say yesterday in terms of this problem, reaction, solution stuff, where you have to create the problem, i.e. these riots, so that you can come in with a solution that basically the people wouldn't have gone for otherwise. So this is coming at a time where you've got this whole Palantir database, you've got digital IDs being pushed all over the world, in the UK massively as well at the moment, to counteract illegal immigration. And what that's about is getting people that are basically otherwise anti-government overreach, anti-surveillance state, anti-Big Brother, getting them on board with it, because those people overwhelmingly are also anti-illegal immigration, anti-mass unfiltered immigration. So it's almost like, I know you've got an issue with that, so I'm going to use that as an excuse to try and get you to agree with something else that I know you probably won't agree with otherwise. what they've managed to do, and they've used this this tribal nature, which is it's all over the United Kingdom. It's particularly big in America, especially since Trump, to be fair, where people, they will agree with things and cheer on things that they would have absolutely hated if it was the other way around. So if you just watch this video here, this is a video of a protester being attacked by LAPD on horseback, and if you just watch this, it's pretty mad.
Peaceful protest and enforce the law when criminal acts occur. The LAPD remains focused on its core mission to protect lives, safeguard constitutional rights, and serve every neighborhood in Los Angeles with integrity. Let me open it up now for any questions you might have or any points that we can clarify. Yeah, if I don't know what basis they use to make that decision.
So when you saw the comments from that, and I know social media is not real life, I know that, but there's a lot of people on there vocalizing their opinion. It's very much police brutality is okay when it's being done to people that we don't like. So you look at that and you go, well, he shouldn't be out there protesting anyway. He's a thug and a rioter. So yeah, have at him. Now, you know, I've got no skin in the game for rioters. I do for protesters. It's a human right, it should be, to be able to protest against the state. But I don't have any skin in the game when it comes to rioters. But at the same time, what the police are doing, attacking people with horses, is insane. And if Harris and Biden were still in charge and they were sending out people to attack MAGA protesters or, you know, January 6th protesters with horses, you'd be going mad about it correctly. You'd correctly be going mad about it. Now this next video is something else, because it's not just attacking protesters, it's attacking the media as well. So if you watch this video, this really is something.
After hours of standing off, this situation has now rapidly deteriorated. The LAPD moving in on horseback, firing rubber bullets at protesters, moving them on through the heart of LA. You just shut the fuck up!
You okay?
I'm good.
Now that video there, that's an Australian journalist being shot with a rubber bullet. Now that was all over the media, and it was framed as a journalist was caught in the crossfire.
Yeah.
Now, if you watch that again in slow motion, no one's caught in the crossfire. The dude is aiming at her, and we're at a point now where actually, when I said about that, I was like, this is insane. Well, you know, they're shooting reporters. People then came back at me and were like, yeah, but she didn't say anything when the police were attacking anti-COVID protesters in Australia. In fact, she was cheering it on. Well, then she's wrong as well.
Yeah.
Two things can be wrong at the same time from from two different sides, and that's an issue that we've got, is this tribal nature, and they are playing on it, ladies and gentlemen. They want you to bite. They want you to get to a point of, yeah, go on, Palantir, do what you like, because in your mind it's good because they're doing it to people I don't like. Well, trust me, guys, it's going to be used on you as well, mate. That's the whole point of it.
Well, yeah, they've played into essentially a human condition, which is tribalism, which, you know, you've only got to go and watch two rival sports teams play each other and see the way the fans interact to see how easy it is to manipulate people into hating and despising somebody who may think slightly different to them. Just go back on that video for a second. If you play that again, just before he shoots her, the camera pans to the left to get the guy that's firing at her in shot. I did not notice that. That's quite weird. I did feel watching that. It's almost like, because part of the job of a cinematographer, a cameraman, is to know what's going to come next. And it's almost like he knew what was coming next,
Well,
which I'm not saying he did, but it's a bit weird.
Of it, but I think if I'm a cameraman playing devil's advocate and I'm talking, because she's finished her piece at that bit and she turns, I would be, as a cinematographer, I would be aware of my surroundings to try and catch things. And I think he's probably looked, he's seen the guy's opened his body up with a gun.
Possibly.
You know,
I'm possibly just being too much of a conspiracy theorist
I don't know,
but you never know.
Write anything off, but
you never know.
But the fact that it's normalized, and this is the thing. And I was banging on about this yesterday. So forgive me if I'm sound like a broken record, but the tribal stuff is what stops anything getting better. Because people will agree with bad things as long as their team's doing it, and they will call out good things if the other team's doing it.
Yeah.
Nothing will ever improve. The world will never get better unless we call out good things on both sides and we call out bad things on both sides.
Absolutely. And that's the problem. Because how many people voted for Trump? What, about 80 million, supposedly? 80 million in a country of 350. So the vast majority didn't. And it would have been the same if Harris got in. Even if the fake election that Biden supposedly won, I think it was 90 odd million votes, still, that's less than a third of the country voted him in. So how are you ever going to have a harmonious nation where a small demographic think they can impose on the rest? 9 million people voted Labour. So therefore, about 60 million people didn't. So you're not going to have a country where 9 million people are going, loving life, I voted for this, great, and the rest are not happy. That's not going to be conducive to a harmonious country. Of course it's not. The job of any leader, surely, should be to come in and go, right, you didn't vote for me, but we're going to work for all of you. We're going to do everything we can to bring this country together. Opposing views, let's all remember, we're all, I'm doing a Trump speech here. Let's all remember, we're all Americans and we all have more in common than we have that separates us. Imagine how different a post-election period would be if that was the case. Whereas instead, you've got the MAGA lot who think they're winning, who are cheering this ridiculous stuff that, as Gaz points out, if Harris was doing the same thing, they'd have been kicking off. And the ones that would have been probably supporting it if Harris was doing it are now kicking off. It's pathetic. If you're calling out behaviour based on who's doing it, you've lost the plot. If we can just sit and agree on a certain list of things that are wrong, like police brutality, like murder, like any form of rioting, we can just agree they're wrong. It's irrelevant who's doing them. We can just agree they're wrong. If you're looking at who's doing it before deciding whether it's a good or a bad thing, you've lost the plot, completely lost the plot. And as you point out, mate, the divide and rule agenda is just lapping it up.
Yeah, of course
it's
it is.
so easy.
Of course it is. The police brutality is wrong. Doesn't matter who it's being done to, it's wrong. And, when Trump came in, he removed those checks and balances. Mm-hmm. He did it by executive order. Because, again, that's all he does, just executive order after executive order. So that the investigation into police and all that kind of stuff, the database of police officers that have committed acts of police brutality and stuff like that, has basically been removed. So any of the checks and balances are gone. Now, once you normalise police brutality, it will be used on you.
Of course it will. Of course it will. And also what that's going to do is that's going to attract a certain type of person into the police because they know those checks and balances that would hold them accountable aren't there anymore. So if you're you're the high school bully who likes a ruck, well, all of a sudden the police is a job for you because you know you're going to be able to behave like that and be protected from any repercussions of doing it. So as, by very nature of cause and effect, the police are going to get more brutal, more violent.
Yeah, and they are.
Right, we're going to move back to the UK here as another attack on farmers and the agricultural industry is looming. Now, this is not a specific, definitely happening story yet because the spending review, if you like, that's coming out in the next few days is, as they always do before things like this, they seep things into the press, which start a conversation, and then they, I guess, garner the feedback and backlash and see what they can get away with. But essentially, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is expected to lay out a new attack on the agricultural industry in her budget in a few weeks, which is going to involve cutting that agricultural budget, which we've already seen attacks on farmers across the country in the last few decades, really, but particularly under this Labour government with the attacks on inheritance tax and so on. So the National Trust, which is an organisation that looks after lots of stately homes and agricultural parts of the UK, and the RSPB have joined forces with farmers to warn the government that cutting the agricultural budget could be catastrophic for nature and rural businesses. So this is not only farmers, it's also talking about, nice stately homes where gardens are kept, where people will use them as tourist attractions and things like that. And they're part of British history in many ways, and those rural businesses that go along with them. In a letter to Food Security and Rural Affairs Minister Daniel Zechner, exclusively seen by Sky News, a dozen of the biggest rural industry organisations say they are deeply concerned about rumoured cuts that will be made to the agricultural budget in Wednesday's spending review. The letter says cutting funding for existing and new environmental farming schemes would be catastrophic to the government's aims for the environment. Now, it's worth pointing out the government doesn't have any aims for the environment. Climate change is a hoax that is going to be used to increase taxes, increase control, and minimise travel and freedoms. Simple as that. It's got nothing to do with protecting the environment. So many things should be put at the top of the list above that if you genuinely wanted to protect the environment. One being supporting farmers, supporting local organic farming, and also supporting agricultural sites in the UK, which is the opposite of what we're seeing happen here. Surely, if you are an environmentalist and you want what's best for the environment, you want it to be left alone. You don't want wind turbines, solar panels, nuclear power stations chucked up everywhere. You want to protect wildlife, you want to protect natural plant life and vegetation, and you want the food, the soil to be as natural and organic and as unchemically affected as possible. But we're seeing the exact opposite. So don't ever pretend this is about the environment. There's the people at the top that know exactly what they're doing, and there's the, to be honest, stupid and quite naive environmentalists in many cases who think they know what they're talking about when they actually don't have a clue. Because if you were genuinely someone who wanted the best for the environment, like I do, you would be calling for things like this, not wind turbines, solar panels, and carbon catchers, for example. So
yeah, they're notable by their silence as well, Jay. The environmentalists, a lot of them. When they were chopping down tens and tens and tens of thousands of trees, urban trees in places
Sheffield,
like Sheffield particularly, that was big, but it was all over the country, so they could put up 5G and 4G infrastructure. The environmentalists didn't say a flaming word.
Oh, they're silent, absolutely silent.
Green Party, where are you? Crickets,
silent,
mate. Crickets.
But you dare buy a diesel car, mate? They're on you.
No, I'm going to buy 2.
Absolutely on you. You dare go on holiday in the summer on an aeroplane? How dare you? But we'll fly across the world in our private jets to sit down and protest. Yeah. Pathetic. So this is another example of the attacks on the agricultural industry, which again ties into a further agenda. If we want to go back to what we were talking about at the top of the show, to do with the Rockefellers and Richard Day and those kind of predictions for the future. One of them was getting people off the land. It was getting people into urban, densely populated areas. They were called human settlement zones in this description of them, where essentially take you back to what we've been told communist countries like Russia and the Soviet Union and China would have been. Massive tower blocks, people densely populated on top of each other, tiny living conditions, barely getting by, barely enough room to do anything, while the farmland, the countryside is just rewilded for climate change, when in truth the countryside should be used for exactly what it's been used for, which is to provide food and provide plant life and so on. And attacks on this industry across the world, we've seen it in Holland, we've seen it in Poland, we've seen it in America as well. This is not an accident. This is not a few incompetent idiots making poor decisions. This is a carefully planned agenda that is going to continue to play out, because, as it says in this story, when it talked about the government minister, food security minister, that's a key thing here. Food security is something that not enough people take seriously enough, because they have externalise that responsibility to the state. Well, look at what they're doing to the people who are giving you the food. Do you really think this is something that's not going to end badly if this trajectory continues? It really is. So let's see what happens this week. As I said, this is kind of a rumour, which usually turn out to be true. Although, as we've discussed, sometimes they put out something that's worse than they're going to actually do. So when they don't go as far as you think, you settle for it. So we'll see what happens in the coming days. I believe it's tomorrow, Wednesday, when this review is going to happen. So we maybe will cover that on Thursday, depending what they come out with.
Yeah, well, you control the food supply, you control the people. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, 100%. Goes back to the fertility thing, create dependency.
Yeah, well, that's the point, isn't it? Get everyone off the land. You know, they reframe it now as you know, you were saying human settlement zones. They're now 15-minute cities. In the case of Bristol, as I was talking about yesterday, livable areas, because everyone died in the other areas.
They love a buzzword, don't they?
But no, I think it's one of those. I think when they do these spending reviews, they put stuff out. They did it the whole time through Rona. They started leaking out stories to see how the public would react to it, and then they would, you know. But also, like you've alluded to there, Jay, what they do is they release a story saying we're going to punch you in the face with a brick, and then the next day when you get slapped in the face, you go, whoo, thank God I didn't get hit in the face with a brick. It's like, yeah, but you still got slapped, dude.
That was much more eloquently put than mine did.
Well, it's true though, isn't it? They do it all the time. And people celebrate it. They go, oh, mate, I dodged that brick. Well, yeah, the brick was never coming, but you still got smacked, man. Right, final story then. We love the BBC, so we're going to touch on them. Your house price will determine how much TV licence fee costs under radical new plans to overhaul BBC funding. The radical plans to overhaul BBC funding are basically the fact that no one pays their TV licence anymore because we're sick and tired of paying to be lied to. If the value of your home increases, so too will the cost of your TV licence. That's the radical new proposal from the BBC chairman Samir Shah. Under the scheme, the one-size-fits-all annual £174.50 price tag would be scrapped in favour of a progressive payment structure where wealthier households pay more. Your TV licence would be collected at the same time as your council tax. There we go. So they're basically going to tie the council tax, the TV licence into your council tax. So therefore you can't refuse to pay it because it's part of your council tax. So I don't pay a TV licence. I don't watch the dross. So that's fine. They sent me a few threatening letters. I sent them one back going, basically, I don't watch your nonsense, so I don't need one. To be fair to them, they wrote back going, fine, don't worry about it. They don't hassle me, so it is what it is. But it wouldn't matter because if it's tied into your council tax, they'll just take it with your council tax. And even if you say, well, I don't watch the BBC, I don't want to pay a TV licence, well, it don't matter, we've taken it anyway. They were pressed, this guy, Samir Shah, he was pressed by the journalist on this and basically asked the question that a lot of us have been asking: why doesn't the BBC become a subscription-based service like Netflix? Therefore, if people want to pay for it, they'll pay for it. And he came back with some, well, the BBC is an institution, the British history, and all this sort of nonsense. The truth of it is because they know no one would subscribe to it.
Yep, absolutely.
You'd have a handful of people would pay a couple of quid to watch Antiques Roadshow. No one else would be bothered. The BBC was famous for its dramas and stuff previously. Used to have some really great British dramas. No,
not anymore.
They're all on ITV. They've not been on the BBC for a very long time. Because people, as I say, people are sick of being lied to. And it's all well and good. Like, don't get me wrong, everyone else lies to you as well. But the BBC, through threat of someone banging on your door and, was it $1,000 or something? The fine used to be something like that. That you have to pay to be indoctrinated and pay to be lied to by a bunch of people that have historically and not so historically protected paedophiles within their ranks and still have a statue built by a paedophile of a grown-up with his hands on the shoulder of a naked boy plastered on the front of their frickin' building. I don't really want to pay for that.
No, and I don't think many people do. Hence why, if they did a Netflix-style system, they'd be done. That'd be the end. I've not paid my TV licence for years. And,
no, same.
You know, there's no way. BBC is a disgrace, absolute disgrace. The fact that, as you pointed out, protected paedophiles for years. You've got people who have been arrested very recently that somehow don't see the inside of jail cells while Lucy Connolly is still behind bars. Makes no sense. Well, it does if you know the agenda, but it's something where the trust and belief in the BBC, I would say, only exists in the elderly demographic in this country. That just kind of, which is probably more because it's something they've always known. It's something that's always been there. And I'd say with anyone under 40 years old, the BBC, apart from a very, very small minority, the BBC are a laughingstock. Absolute laughingstock for so many reasons. They used to have everything. They used to have all the sport. They used to have really good low-level British sport. That used to highlight sports like gymnastics and fishing and swimming that weren't really the big thing. Don't have any of that anymore, as you mentioned. The dramas they don't have anymore. Their news coverage is pathetic. Their sports coverage, live sports coverage they still have occasionally, is pathetic. They're just a joke, absolute joke organisation. And if you've got to try and bully somebody, which is essentially what they do,
it's a tax.
Attack somebody into paying for your service, then it ain't really worth paying for, is it? So bring it on.
Nothing deserves to be an institution either, Jay.
No,
This frustrates me. Oh, it's a British institution. We need to protect it at all costs. Okay, there's certain things that we need to protect at all costs. Actually, some of the history of the amazing stately homes and architecture that in the previous story, they're defunding. Yeah. That's the kind of stuff we need to keep. Stuff that we can look back on and go, this is the culture that built us. This is where we are. Whereas when it comes to an organisation like the BBC, which is just a television channel or a series of television channels and radio stations, if it's not fit for purpose, it's not fit for purpose. The same as the NHS. Yeah. It's the golden calf. Can't say a bad thing about it. Okay, but if it's not fit for purpose, then it needs looking at, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And the excuse of it's British institution, rubbish.
The joke with the BBC as well is if the BBC said we are a state-sponsored broadcaster, therefore we will always give the state's perspective on any given issue. You could at least respect that to the point that you know what they're telling you, and therefore you can take anything you see from them through that lens. Whereas no, we're independent, we're impartial. We don't pick a side. Well, you do though.
They do.
You're not.
Work for the permanent government.
You work for the permanent government, exactly. That's why on anything that is related to the longer term agenda that we see play out, whoever's in charge, they are always on the side of that. That's the joke of it. That's the joke of it. At least be honest. Come out and say, yeah, we're far right. We think this. We think that. At least then people know what they're watching. But the whole joke of we sit in the middle. We are there to hold the government together. No, you're not. You're pathetic.
It's how you know. It's how you know who the next government is. Or it is meant to be.
Yeah.
Because the BBC it works for the permanent government. So it toes the line on everything, as you've said there, Jay, whether it be climate change, whether it be COVID, whether it be Ukraine,
immigration,
whatever. I mean, they're starting to say a little bit now about Israel-Palestine, but not a lot. They're fundamentally pro-Israel and always have been. You say, oh, okay, we'll go along with that. And then you'll get to a point where they'll start to call out the government. Like they did the Tories towards the end of the Tory reign. And you sit back and you go, oh, Labour are the next government then. Absolutely. Labour are meant to be the next government. So when you see the BBC, as they will eventually, turn on Starmer, that's when you go, oh, okay, so Reform maybe are meant to be the next government. And that's how you know.
Well, you can already see that now with the coverage they're giving Farage and the type of coverage they're giving him, that they're a lot more sympathetic to what he's talking about, which
they never were previously.
Has that changed? No, it's not. It's changed because it's been allowed to change. It's certainly not organic.
I wonder as well, ladies and gentlemen, just to get this out there, with Trump, most Trump supporters, or a large portion of Trump supporters, are people that want change. They're not happy with the status quo. They're not happy with the deep state, as they call it, the globalists, whatever you want to say, the New World Order, whatever terminology you want to use. They're not happy with it, and they would protest and stand up. So you go, okay, we're going to give them someone. So if you need a leader, one will be provided. Absolutely. They gave you Trump to lead you to glorious defeat, and it would not shock me if, because you've got this growing mega movement, Make England Great Again, this growing movement and unrest in the UK, that we won't be given our own Donald Trump, and that could well be Farage.
Oh, 100%. I'd say that's incredibly likely. Incredibly likely, because he's a similar figure. He's very divisive. He's very aggressive, but he speaks quite well, and he speaks to a large demographic of the issues that people are genuinely wanting talked about. He was in Wales yesterday talking about the coal mines and opening them, when a lot of people over there will be very supportive of that. So, he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing.
But remember as well, when it comes to Farage and Tyson, all of these people, where were they when we were at the coalface?
Nowhere.
He was outside whacking his pots and pans and advocating for Tony Blair to be vaccine czar. Never forget that.
No, never forget that. Absolutely. Right. Well, thank you very much for tuning in with us this morning, everybody. I'll be back with Richard tomorrow morning, and then we'll have a trending in the afternoon tomorrow as well. What have you got this week? Who's coming up on your show tomorrow?
Don't ask me questions like that. I have to check.
Well, we got a good interview. Bring the Fire on Sunday though. Pat Cash was in.
Mate, that was great. Yeah. No, I do know who's on tomorrow, but I haven't written the script to put it all together yet. But yeah, Pat Cash, legend obviously of tennis. Do you know what I mean? Like he's the only tennis player to have ever won Wimbledon as a junior, a senior, and as a master.
Wow.
The only person on the planet to have ever done that. Really nice guy. We got on really well actually. Very switched on, knows what's going on in the world, very outspoken during Rona against the Ukraine war. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah, he aged pretty well as well, hasn't he?
He's aged quite well, yeah. To be fair, I've aged like someone who had a paper round in Baghdad. He aged a lot better, but yeah, it was good. I hope you enjoy it. It's worth watching.
Awesome. Right, thank you very much, everybody. We'll catch up with you tomorrow morning. Have a great Tuesday. Bye for now.